Well, here we are in our final virtual show and share, fully virtual show and share. We'll have some more information about that later, but tonight we have quite a few people who want to share off their projects. And so we're going to get started with Tracy and a cookie cutter.
Hi. I decided that I wanted to make cookies for the grill out next week, but
Spoiler.
they had to be Knox Makers cookies. So I originally was going to show this next week, but then I took lots of good pictures, so I decided to make it this week and then spoil the fact that we're having a grill out next week. So if you go to the first slide, please. There's an Inkscape plugin where you can take an SVG and do the plugin magic, and it will port it to OpenSCAD, so you can print out a model of it. So how it works is, it's sort of hard to read on the screen, but on the left side, it basically has like a list of coordinates for where the polygon is. So my drawing in Inkscape had all of the different shapes of the Knox Makers logo separately, so I moved them, and then when it ports into OpenSCAD, you have to tell it what height you want it, so I gave it a height. But then for stability, you know, cookie cutters have like that rim on it, like in the picture here, and it didn't have that. So what I did was I took the polygon, the module that it made for the polygon, and I copied it and made it fat and short instead of skinny and tall. So it basically is the entire polygon twice, and one is tall and one is squat and like one layer. So this was my cookie cutter. If you go to the next slide, it shows a picture of the cookie cutters that I printed out. So one of just the entire logo, and one of them with all the different elements separate for what I wanted to do.
How many dimensions did you use for this?
Well, I started out in 2, and then I made it better and did 3D with a 3D printer. I did not laser this one, but maybe lasers are coming soon. Okay, so the first one I wanted to do was a sandwich cookie. So I had the bottom cookie was just the square, and then it had frosting in the middle, and then a top like with a window with the logo on it. So if you'll go to the next slide, it'll show, oh, this is it when it's cut out. So I cut out all the squares, and then I decided that the M in the logo was too small. I really should have made them bigger cookie cutters, but they were quite small. So then I baked it and then put it together like a sandwich cookie, which is next. And they ended up looking like this. So that's just, it's just plain frosting that I use food coloring to make black. It's not chocolate flavored. It's just plain powdered sugar frosting. But so the next type of cookie, if you go to the next slide, I wanted to up my game a little bit. And you can buy these slice and bake cookies and at the store, but like, why they don't have Knox Makers logos at the store, so I was going to make them. So I Googled around online to figure out how they make them, and what you do is you have a cookie cutter of one color of cookie dough, and then you surround it with the other color of cookie dough, and and then you make this tall tube of cookie, and then refrigerate it, and then freeze it, and then slice it and bake it that way. So I was going to try and do that. If you go to the next slide, my cookie cutters are very tiny, and all the dough got stuck inside of them. So I tried really hard. I mean, you can't even barely see it without zooming in. I tried really hard to like make a stack of the little wrenches, and they kept getting stuck in the cookie cutters, and it was real bad times. So I decided that I was going to just try and mold it into the Knox Makers logo sideways instead of like layer by layer. So if you go to the next one, this is my attempt at the Knox Makers logo. It doesn't really look like it yet because, you know, you have to slice it and then you see the magic. Like I've seen these GIFs on the internet where it's like they put all this garbage together and then they slice it and it looks beautiful. So that's what I did. If you go to the next one, then I surrounded it with the white cookie dough and then I sliced it up in the next one. That looks bad. That looked real bad. But I still had a lot of cookie dough left, so let's try again. I learned some things. Let's try again. Go to the next slide, please. No, that still looks very bad. Yes, they taste good, and I'm still bringing them to the grill out, but they don't look like the Knox Makers logo. So I still had a little bit left. So I was like, I have to try this one more time. What else am I going to do with this cookie dough? I will try one more time to model the Knox Makers logo in the next slide. No, it did not come out well either. So we're going to have lots of deformed cookies at the grill out next week, but, you know, they still taste good. So then I wanted to make a third kind of cookie. I wanted to make a press cookie. So you make the dough and then it's a ball and you smush it down and it has the logo smushed down on top of it. So if you go to the next slide, this is where the lasers come in. I laser cut this out of acrylic, and what I did was I just hash filled the logo in and then it like engraved it so it's a little bit depressed from the rest of the cookie press. And then I was like, well, what kind of cookies should I make? I'll make peanut butter cookies. So I made the peanut butter cookie balls and I smushed it down with the cookie press, and next slide, please. It didn't do anything. Like you can barely, oh look, you can sort of see it. I think that it was just the wrong kind of cookie. So what I ended up doing was, next slide, is I just pressed it into the cookie using the cookie cutter, just like lightly stamped them with the cookie cutter. And then my last slide is those baked. Yes, then I got to use the 3D printer again. So the laser one failed completely.
Oh.
So
I mean, you can tell that's the logo right there.
Yes, that's about the one that you can tell the most that it's the logo. But, you know, they all taste good. They're waiting in my freezer for next week. And that is my cookie adventures. Mostly fails, but, you know, they taste good. So.
Well, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. I can't wait to try these. What kind of cookies are they?
The first ones were butter cookies with frosting, like Christmas cookie flavored. The second ones were vanilla dough and chocolate dough. And these are peanut butter. So.
Okay. All right. So we'll all get to see these next week.
Yes, and hopefully make them all go away.
I'm sure they will. All right. Well, thank you. All right. Next up, we're going to have Brandon show us an update to his Leviathan board. There you are.
There I am. Cool. So yeah, if you want to pull up the first picture, kind of shows the old board versus the new. The new one is on the left, the old one is on the right. I did multiple things with this new board, kind of fixing some pain points I had, improving some things, adding new features. The first thing you'll notice, I guess, just looking at them at a glance, is the one on the left looks a lot less cluttered. That's because I found some resistor arrays, and the people in the electronics chat saw my heart break with that when I initially ordered them. The first boards had pads that were way too big, but those, if you can zoom in on that left board where the resistor arrays are, yeah, those are 4 resistors right there, and they're smaller than a Tic Tac. I'd say about half the size of a Tic Tac. So yeah, they're very, very difficult to place by hand, but they're working really well, and it's allowed me to fit a lot more onto the board and make them a lot faster. Basically, I went to some more surface mount components like the motor driver and capacitors, those sort of things that I was doing through hole that took a lot longer. The biggest new feature I put on this board is power output. So for the board, look on, it may just be easier for me to hold these up rather than going back and forth. On the old board along here, I have 3 power inputs for 12 volt, 10 volt, and 5 volt, which I had to take buck converters, dial those down to the different voltages, install those in separately to power all the different things on the board. What I did on the new board is basically built that in. So I only have to have one power source, a 12 volt, coming in on the top. And then the central part of the board here with the really big components is a buck converter circuit. It's my first time I've ever done anything like that. It was a little worrying getting the boards in and plugging them up. I didn't know if it was going to explode or not work or anything, because they're a lot more complicated than linear voltage regulators, which is what I have on the left there for the 10 volt. It's my first time with polygon board and having to interference and crosstalk and all of that, but wound up and then just kind of a thing and kind of on I have the, and it's just part of the silk screen there. Board logo, actually a copper that I built and put silk screen solder mask over it in order, metal and shine, really nice. But it's all working out really well. I've been really happy with it. If you want to go to the next picture,
yeah,
that's kind of what the copper looks like. There's nothing exciting on the bottom, but you can see the logo right there separated from all the other traces, and then the pie in nice lines, just big, which apparently help with impedance and keeping the signal, that inductor on plane, leaving that gap. Yeah, it wound up working pretty well, and I'm happy with it.
You're breaking up a little bit, so it's hard to hear some of the things, but just for people who aren't familiar with the first board, this is a project that you're doing to control a saltwater tank. Is that right?
Yeah. I forget, other people may not have seen it. Yeah, it's for my fish tank back here, but I just control everything in it with it: the heaters, pumps, filters, dosing, auto top off, the lighting schedule. Just it has all sorts of different drivers on there for the LEDs and stepper motors and inputs for pH and temperature. I used to build these just by hand and realized, hey, a circuit would be a lot easier. So,
Right. Well, it looks like a pretty nice improvement here. The board certainly looks cleaner and easier to understand.
I actually know what I'm doing now rather than learning.
Well, that's good. That's pretty great. Thank you for the update on that. Forward to hearing more about that. All right. Next up, we have Paul and little Paul, who are going to share with us wedding gifts and something else.
Howdy, y'all.
Hello, Paul.
It's been a day. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay.
Yeah.
Hi. Okay, go hide. All right. A few years ago, some of my friends decided they wanted to get married. That was apparently a poor decision. Well, good decision for them, but poor decision overall. So I decided that I was going to flex my woodworking and make them some boxes. First slide, please. So I started by cutting some wood. Next slide, please. And then I glued that wood together, as is customary to do when making boxes. Next slide, please. I put some hinges on those boxes and stained them. I think they looked okay. Then I needed to make the boxes that go inside those boxes. Next slide, please. I took some MDF and some veneer and wait, hold on. Gotta get my air horn. Okay. Took some MDF and some veneer. I didn't know at the time, I didn't have a suitable way to veneer wood. Most of the time you want to use a vacuum bag or hammer veneer or any other sort of technique that to get the veneer flat without air bubbles on the wood. I did some research on the internet and found out you could take Titebond 2, the wood glue, and just slather it on both surfaces and then let it dry, and then you can reactivate it with an iron, and it will glue and make a nice solid seal. So then I decided, since I'm going to do inlay, I needed to do some templates. So I started on the Illustrator or Photoshop or something. I don't know, it's been a while, and I made some templates on some paper and printed them out, because this is before I had laser cutters and CNCs and 3D printers, and I only had a fret saw. So I did all that by hand, and it was miserable, but I had some letters. So I stuck them down to some wood using that double-sided carpet tape, and began the long, arduous process of chiseling and doing hand marquetry, which is also a miserable experience. And that was what I wanted them to look like. Some initials with some fields of, I think the black stuff was, this has like been 10 years. So I think that was, is Wingay or Winge or whatever you want to call it. The black wood, that's the ebony substitute that's a lot cheaper, but the splinters are toxic. And then some maple. The orange is Paduke, and the purple is Purple Heart, and then the veneer background is a mahogany, just a bog standard mahogany. So then you trace it out, and you chisel, and you trace, and you chisel, and you just keep trying to get the things to fit until they fit the way you want them to. And then when it's all done, you sand it down real smooth and throw some stuff on it. And sometimes it looks okay. So that's the finished product for the top once you get it all sanded down. I was really careful not to sand through the veneer, because that would have been bad.
Right.
So then I've got 2 box tops with MDF and the veneer on them, because like that style mahogany would have been more than my car payment. So I opted for veneer on MDF instead, because it's pretty stable and I don't have to worry about it like moving around on me over the years. So then I started making the rest of the box out of just regular mahogany. Well, African mahogany. I don't want to get into the whole mahogany debate, but anyway, that's African mahogany, and I started cutting it up and making a box. One's a jewelry box, the other's going to be a humidor, maybe, I don't know. So then you do all that mess and you do box things. And then you glue the box together. And then I wanted to put some edge banding and some stringing veneer patterns in there. And Woodcraft sells these little strips. They're 2.5, 3 feet long, and they already have the patterns in them, and they're made of holly and ebony, and they're already stained and dyed, and you really don't have to mess with them, and they're a lot easier than doing it yourself. So I decided to use those and just some chunks of that leftover Wingay that I had for the veneer, or for the inlay up there for the edges on the box. So this is where I took the box after I glued it all together and ran it through the table saw to cut the rabbets. It didn't work out so well because this is before the point where I discovered there was a thing called a flush cut table saw insert, or a zero clearance insert, and you can see there the arrows is pointing to where the blade kind of creeped up a bit. I would have to correct this later with sawdust and glue. Anyway, so then I put the inlay stringing on. It's that checkerboard pattern of holly and black, and it's not terribly expensive, and it lends a great effect to any project you may have. And then I glued the Wingay strips on the edge there, and then took a hand plane and planed it all down nice and flat, and then sanded it with an orbital sander and made a nice box, which is a shame because then I have to cut it in half so I can put hinges on it. So then I did that. That's the jewelry box. It's progressing in a similar fashion. All those little bits of Paduke, I kind of like hand sculpted, as it were, with a rasp and a file over the course of many hours of cursing. I came up with some new curse words. It was great. But then I got all that put on there, and then there are drawers that kind of slide in and out. With humidors, you want to use a wood on the inside. You want to seal the outside so that nothing can get in, air-wise or humidity. And then on the inside wood, you want to use something like Spanish cedar. If you've ever bought a box of cigars or had a humidor and you notice that smell, that Spanish cedar, it imparts that flavor on the cigar. So you buy a bunch of Spanish cedar and you don't want to put a bunch of glue and crap on it because that just mucks with the flavor. So all this stuff on the inside is just friction fit. And I spent a lot of time trying to get that just right. That's where a block plane and a hand plane comes in real handy. So I cut all these pieces out and fit them in there and just slid them on in. And then eventually it made a box. And then I made a tray to go inside of the box so that you can have multiple layers of cigars in your humidor. And then the jewelry box, it needed something soft and not gonna scratch up your jewelry. So I took some cardboard and I used some weldwood, which I don't advise using weldwood on anything that it doesn't have adequate time to air out, because weldwood stinks. There's a lot better contact adhesives than that. But contact adhesives are great because you can slather some on one side and then slather some on the other side and then let them dry, and then you push them together and use a brayer to roll them on, and they end up really flat and without much bubbles. And you get a pretty decent covering of your surface. So that's the inside of the jewelry box there, with all the faux suede, whatever they call it, that I bought at the hobby store. And then that's the finished products for the jewelry box and the humidor.
Man, those boxes look amazing.
Fun.
How many years ago did you do this?
2012, 2013.
Oh.
I'm told by the recipients that they are still holding up and used on a regular basis. So I guess that
Nice.
says something. Now a point on the jewelry box, that's Paduke. Paduke tends to turn to poo brown color when exposed to ultraviolet light. So I finished it with cut marine varnish, because marine varnish has UV blockers in it, to try and extend the vibrance of the orange color, because it turns kind of brown after about 4 or 5 months of sitting in direct sunlight. I've got some pieces in my garage that were sitting under the window, and one side's nice and orange, the side that was down on the table, and you flip it over and it's brown. So keep that in mind if you're using any of these weird exotic species. Purple heart does that too.
Yep.
So there's the box. I think I got another slide in there with them open. Yeah, there we go. So that's the humidor open. I put a hygrometer in there, and then whatever that thing is called that you put the water on to keep it hydrated. Sponge, I don't know. I bought a humidor kit. It was like $10 on Amazon. But it holds cigars, and it actually maintains the humidity pretty well. The seal's actually pretty good. I was surprised at that because it's my first humidor, and he uses it all the time to keep his fancy cigars. And the next one I think is the jewelry box with the drawers open. Yeah, there you go. And that is my wedding gift to my friends. That's the nicest wedding gift I've ever made. Probably the nicest wedding gift I will ever make. Now that I've got one of these things, I don't have time to spend on wedding gifts for my friends anymore.
How many hours do you think you put into these?
Oh, I think cumulative, I probably have about 120 or something. I
Wow.
don't know. It was a while ago,
Yeah.
back when I had time to spend on things like that.
Well, they are super fancy, and the result is amazing. You did a great job.
I was pleased with the outcome.
Very nice.
I don't think I will make anything that nice for a very long time. Are you ready to
Yeah.
show and share your things?
Yes.
Okay, come show and share your things. We have a last minute addition.
Okay.
Okay, show them your things.
Okay.
What did, that's fine. What did you make?
Okay, so I don't have very much, but I do have these Iron Man things that I
Well,
built.
they can't see them. You gotta hold them up to the camera.
So this is I do not know what this is.
You don't know what that is? It's Legos.
It's Legos. I just don't know what. I don't know if it's a boat or a plane. I'm guessing it's a plane.
It's a boat plane.
No, it's not. It's a plane.
Okay.
Ooh,
So you built an Iron Man plane from Legos?
yes. I
Very
also
awesome.
have Hulkbuster. So this
Hulkbuster?
That would be a Hulkbuster. Yes.
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 Here's this
So
thing.
you built those things out of Legos.
And
Nice.
I have Iron Man here. This opens.
You're not going to go through all 14 suits of Iron Man, are you?
And here's another one.
Okay.
This gets a suit.
You have a lot of Iron Man.
And this.
That's very impressive. Are you going to build your whole life as well?
I guess.
Yes.
He keeps trying to
And-
get me to 3D print him a Groot.
So next time I want to show and share.
I'm probably just going to steal the one off the 3D printing table.
Not stealing. This is the first Iron Man suit. Right here.
That's the first Iron Man
Okay.
suit. Okay, great. What else you got? Get two more. What are the other two? Those Venom? Is that Venom?
No.
What is that then? It looks like Venom.
No, it's not Finn.
Well, they can't see it. Yeah. What is it then? What is that? What are those guys?
I don't know what these are, but they're good.
Well, they look like Venom to me, or some sort of spider or something, because they've got the things on the back.
It's not Venom. It's
Oh,
just, it's just some other dummy,
Okay.
some kind of other dumbass.
All right. PG-13. All right.
Technically,
Well-
by the Motion Picture Association of America, that is PG-13. They're allowed a certain quota of
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing. Thanks for sharing. All right, Chuck, you're up next with a rocking airplane.
Okay. That, as woodworking, that's going to be a hard act to follow. Okay, let's see. I'm not seeing any image yet. We can go ahead with number one.
Yeah.
I'm going to show up on your screen as John.
I see that, yeah.
John Duffy is my neighbor, and I'm sitting at his condo tonight.
Okay.
He's also a member in woodwork.
Do you want to turn your camera on?
Let's see. I thought I did.
Oh, you did. There you are.
There we are. Okay, that first slide you're seeing is a picture I found online of a rocking airplane because I just became a great-grandfather a few weeks ago.
Oh,
And knowing
nice.
around Christmas time, I thought I need to build something for this great grandson. So that looked like a fascinating project. And so that's what I set off to do. Next slide, please. And that's the fuselage just made out of plain pine. There's 3 different sections that are laminated up to make the fuselage. Next. And there's sort of a rough beginnings of the pieces coming together a little
You can
bit.
see it coming together there, yeah.
The fuselage and the seats are pine, and just some dowel rods connecting the bi-wing sections together, and little cutouts in the top wing for handles. Next slide. And that's the rocking portion of it. There's stanchions there that hold the airplane up from the platform. And I had a little machine shop make those up. We certainly have the talent at Knox Makers to do that, but didn't really catch up with anybody to do those things. But the rockers are just pine, some 3/4 laminated together to make 1.5 inch thick on each of the rockers. The one
Did
thing
you
I
cut
did
this on a bandsaw or?
on the bandsaw, yeah.
Okay.
And then I use the rotary sander to smooth them up to the line, kind of a thing.
Right.
And then the foot treads there are, again, mahogany. On the bottom of the rockers, you can't see there, but I cut a slot 1 inch wide and 1/8 inch deep and put a leather strap in there. So now when it rocks, it's A, quieter, and B, a little friendlier on the floor.
Right, right.
Next slide. Okay, there's some of the pieces laid out, the little propeller and some of the wing sections and the stanchions all painted up yellow. Next slide. Okay, the plans that I found did not have a drive system for the propeller, but I wanted the propeller to go around. So inside the fuselage, I found a little 12-volt DC motor, put a little battery pack together, and the black box on the side you see there is just a timer. I didn't want Dad to have to replace the batteries when we went off, so it'll run 15 minutes.
Right.
So I think Isaac probably came over and caught me one day trying to be an electrician and solder all that together, but somehow it worked.
Yeah.
Next. And then
Oh, nice.
there's the finished rocking airplane. His name happens to be Oliver, and that's why we got Oliver Air. And so there was not a lot of creative woodworking in that, but a lot of fun to build, and I think my great grandson will be happy. He was born 3 weeks ago, so he's got about a good part of a year before he'll be riding it.
Right. Well, by Christmas, he'll be what?
Yeah,
6
he'll
months, 7 months old?
close to
Yeah,
that.
maybe. Yeah. I'm sure he'll love it. The result is amazing. I really like it.
It was a fun project to do, and it created a lot of interest around the space.
Yeah.
And speaking of the space, it's been a real joy for me to work over there and to meet the folks. It's been ideal for somebody older like me who can be there during the daytime and have access to all the equipment. It's been wonderful.
Yeah. That's
And
great.
That's the
Okay.
rocket.
It looks really great, and I'm sure your grandson will love it. So.
The propeller is, that little motor is only 100 RPM, and the propeller is fastened with nothing but an O-ring as the friction drive, so that if he touches that while it's running, the motor will run and the propeller will stop.
Okay.
It's safe.
Do you have a bearing in there, or is it just turning
Yeah.
on the motor?
A shaft that runs through there, and it's on some bronze bushings.
Okay. Yeah.
And
Very
then the
cool.
prop is mounted onto the shaft and with an O-ring groove in the shaft, so the prop is driven only by friction of the O-ring.
Nice.
And that's
That's
it.
really great. Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you
That's
for
really
allowing me.
nice. All right. Very cool.
And thanks to John Duffy for helping me set up here tonight. I haven't been on the space before, so this worked out great.
Well, thanks, John. Oh, you got a few more pictures here from different angles. Nice. Thank you. All right, next up, we have Amos, who is going to show us some holsters he made.
For sure. So if we'll go ahead and go to the first slide, I basically got a picture that's going to show you guys what I'm going to be demoing off. I'm kind of doing the finished product first, and then we'll go through how I made each one. So both of these are pancake style holsters, and I basically wanted to demo that you can use this same kind of workflow to make a pancake holster for literally anything. So I have a Leatherman multi-tool on the left there, and then a Ruger 9E on the right. So we'll go to the next slide. So the first thing you want to do is basically take your object that you're making your holster for, lay it down on some paper, draw around it, and then add padding for where your belt goes. This takes some trial and error. So I suggest like using paper first before you use leather. So what I do is I mark it out on paper, and then I like cut it out and then put it on top of what's it called? Like postcard paper. So a much thicker grade, and then use masking tape to make it even more like thicker, and then start cutting around to detail that. So also in these pictures, I tried to include what tools that I use to make the step. So next picture.
Did you use the knife to cut that out?
I did not actually. I used a box cutter that you'll see in
Okay.
in the next one. The knife, that's the box cutter I used. But that knife is sharp enough to use to cut leather. Those Leatherman products are great. So there, I basically cut out a little octagon kind of shape for the back, and then a giant rectangle that's going to be wet molded on the front. So we'll go to the next picture. Here I went ahead and dyed everything up. So the back got a black dye, and the front got a red dye. Those are both Fiebing's black pro grade. I like the pro over the regular because I think there's alcohol in the pro or something. I just know that they leave a better color, in my opinion. The pro does. Okay. And then I also got that tip from Weaver Leather on YouTube, which is if you haven't heard of him and you're into leatherworking, go check him out. So next slide, please. Here's where I did my wet molding. So what you do is you basically put your object down on top of a hard surface. You throw down the top part of your leather. You want to get it soaked in hot water for about 10 minutes. Well, it really doesn't need to be that long. I just left it in the tub for like 10 minutes, but it's really only a few seconds is all it needs. But anywho, you get your leather just soaked to the brim, and then you lay it down on top of your object. Warm water or hot water works the best because it makes the leather more pliable. So then you just start using your fingers and any tools that you have available that don't have hard edges to go around and make your shapes.
So is this the tool you use to make the shape around there?
Yeah, that's a bone file, I think is what those are called, or bone something, I don't know. But it's basically a long piece of plastic that I use to basically gouge out that center piece. To answer the incoming question, yes, you can dye it after you form. I just find that it's a little harder to do that. But if you're in a pinch for dye, you can totally form and cut and do dyeing at the end.
I'm really surprised it takes that shape so well. Just from using soft. You said you don't use hard things to form it here. You use soft things.
Yeah,
right?
you want to use you want to cut your fingernails first because you'll gouge the crap out of your leather if you have fingernails. Found that out the hard way. But yeah, you want to use your thumbs mostly and just work it. Then what I've found is after you work it for like 5 minutes or so, throw in the oven on, thank you, bone folder. Anywho, throw it in the oven on 200 degrees for about 3 minutes. And it dries up really quickly. Any longer than 3 minutes and you're going to get burnt leather, which is no fun, but it does make an interesting color if you burn your leather. So anywho, then you just work it again and you let it sit overnight. That really helps letting it sit overnight. So we can go to the next slide. So here is where I have cut out, basically after doing the wet molding and you let it sit overnight, you go ahead and cut out. At this stage, I also forgot to mention that between steps in here, I glued. So after I did the wet molding, once it dried just a little bit, I put down some contact cement on both sides of the leather, and then basically like pushed them together and then let it sit, and it cured overnight. And then you just cut it out, and then you want to edge treat. I don't have a picture of what edging looks like on this, or edge beveling. But essentially what you do is you take an edge beveler in leatherworking, which is like this, let me turn on my camera really quick. Wow. Any second now. Can you guys see my camera yet?
Yep, we can see
Okay.
you.
All right, cool. I can't see me. So anywho, it basically looks like this. It's like a little prong device with a wooden handle. They run like $12. They're pretty cool. But you run that across your edge and it creates this beveled effect. And then you take your slicker and a little bit of, you can do water or you can do this beveling chemical that I have, toconol oil, I guess. Not really sure, but it works pretty good. And you just rub your slicker across it. You don't want to press down too hard because it will actually kind of like bend the leather, if that makes sense. So you just want the friction to basically put the oil into the leather, and it creates this glass-like effect on the edges. Really cool. So that's edge beveling. So we'll go to the next slide. So here I went ahead and punched out all of the lines that I was going to use for sewing. So those are my punches there on the bottom right-hand corner. I think those are 5 or 6 millimeter punches. Can't remember. But yeah, you basically create like a line with a marker of some kind, like a little metal. I use like what looks like an ice pick, but it's I forget what the term is. I'm blanking on terms tonight. Anywho, you use that to create some sort of marker or an edge creaser or whatever. And then that's your stitching line. You go through and an awl. Thank you. Yes. Anywho, so you use an awl to create your line. They also make like edge things that basically have a knife inside of them that cut a tiny little line for your anywho for your sewing lines to go down in there. Sorry, I'm just watching the chat come in. It's distracting, but awesome. Anywho, so yeah, like you punch out all your lines for stitching, and then I went ahead, if you zoom in a little bit, you can see that I've stamped in some letters. So I have a side business that I call the Crafty Possum, and that's what I stamped into my sides there. I'm just kind of showing you what kind of like customization you can get with these things. Thank you for the love of the colors there. All right, so we can go to the next slide. So here, before I did the stitching, I went ahead and finished it with this leather balm atom wax combination. Basically, this makes it water resistant, not waterproof, but water resistant. And then if it does get a lot of water on it, it'll still hold its shape. It just might lose some of its color, worst case scenario. But I found that like sealing it up before you do the stitching is pretty awesome because the sealant will get into the stitching holes. And it also changes the color to be a more fuller color, if that makes sense. So we'll go to the next slide. So here I've got it stitched up. I actually did use the multi-tool for this one because when you're running it through the stitch holes, sometimes the needles will get stuck. So I basically pull my pliers out and pull the needle through. You want to kind of be careful when you're doing that because if you're like brute forcing it a couple times, or sometimes when you're brute forcing it, you can actually punch through the wrong side of the leather and it'll create like this off color look. You'll just kind of, if you ever do leather working and you try it, you'll know what I'm talking about when you'll get there. But it's not terrible. And then when you get done stitching, you actually tie a square knot off and then you use a lighter to burn it like nylon. And it like makes a mushroom on top of your stitching. So yeah, that's it for stitching. And also if you zoom in, you can see I did a purple color on the stitch lines. So it's red and purple and then black on the back. Although I don't show the back side, I don't think at any point. All right, so next slide. So here's basically the same process except done with a 9mm. So you lay your gun down, you sketch out the pattern, and then you actually get pretty intuitive at putting in where your holes need to go after you've done it a few times. I think this was my 4th attempt at a pancake holster. The last 2, which are the ones that you're seeing, were the successful ones. Then there was a sort of successful one before that, and then a complete failure at the beginning. So it took 4 iterations to get the process pretty down pat. So we'll go next slide. So here, when you're doing something like a handgun or a cell phone or anything that is touchy when it comes to water, you want to wrap your object, and I use plastic wrap. And then you just basically put the leather down on top of it. Same process as before. Again, for objects that are sensitive to water, again, guns aren't super sensitive to water, but I'm protective over mine, so I don't want it to be exposed to it too much. I leave it in the mold for about an hour, and then it's set good enough that I can pull the gun out really gingerly and then just let it cure overnight. Again, there is a layer of contact cement after the mold dries for a little bit. You can lay down the contact cement. So next slide. You punch out your holes for your stitch lines and then stitch. This one was kind of a rush job because I'd never made a gun holster before, and I was kind of curious if it would even work. So my stitching's not as pretty on this one as it is on the other one. But it actually holds really well together. And so we'll go to the next slide. And here's a glamour shot I took of my phone and the holster for the Leatherman multi-tool. And the worst thing about this multi-tool thing, so I don't carry like out in public. I usually use my firearm for like when I'm at home. So like when I'm carrying that multi-tool on my back, it feels like I'm carrying a gun because of like the thickness and the width of it. So the other day, like I was at Walmart and it just made me super self-conscious that I had that on my back. But you get used to it. But the other worst thing is it's super distracting. Like you just keep wanting to pull the knife and push it back in because it's like really slick how it goes in and out. Super satisfying. I have a touch of ADHD. And then we'll go to the next shot. And that is basically the shot we saw at the beginning. And I get asked a lot, I don't know if you guys can see if it's in frame really well, but I get asked a lot what the retention on this looks like. And you really have to like give it some to get it out of there, because this actually grinds up against the leather a little bit and catches it. And then that wet molding makes it really, really in there. So I probably wouldn't go, hauling and running a mile in this thing. But I did do some jumping around and it stayed in the holster. So I was happy.
Okay, nice.
So that's it for me.
I really like the red color of the knife holder. It turned out really nice.
Thank you. I was really happy with how it came out. If you zoom in a little bit, you might be able to tell on the knife holster. Yeah, there's black edging on it, which has a really good contrast. Although not on the inside, but above, up above where my t-shirt is.
There.
But, yeah. There's black edging, and then the back panel is black as well.
So did you stain it black?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
I didn't show that in any of the pictures, but well, no, I did in one of the dying pictures. But yeah, I stained it black.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. I like
Thank
that
you.
a lot.
Appreciate it.
I'm really surprised at how easily it forms with just water. I haven't done a lot of leather working before, and so, but I mean it formed to that knife really nice.
It did, yeah. And then taking your bone folder or an awl or whatever you want, it doesn't have to be anything like that. You can really just take your pinky and like carve it in there, in that line in there. It really helps things retain. When I put the knife in there for the first time, I actually had to use like both hands, and I was pulling it because it created like a vacuum effect.
Right.
So you got to break the leather in. The first 100 or so pulls really suck.
Just imagine you all night like pulling it in.
Oh yeah, and it's so satisfying when it clicks into place too. It's almost like mechanical. It's great.
Right. Well, thank you for showing that off. That was really interesting.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to end things here with Laurie, who's going to show us Toadstool Tribulation.
Hi there. Get
Hey.
that light out of the back. That's bad. Okay. Hi. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. All right. First slide, please. Oh, there was one before that. Did it come in or no?
It might be out of order. I don't know.
Uh-oh. Okay. Anyway, because I was going to show you what it was supposed to be. So I was making, it was really cool mushrooms. My mom went to a crafts fair a couple years ago, and she bought this really nice like cement mushroom. for her garden. She has a beautiful English garden in Michigan, and she bought it for like $45 or something. And she just loved this mushroom. And I'm like, all right. I'm like, Mom, I could totally make that for you. I could totally make that for you. And so, you know, Mother's Day is here and stuff like that. I am, of course, behind on Mother's Day. I had COVID again, so over Mother's Day. So I'm like, we're going to postpone Mother's Day a little bit. And then so I'm like, okay, I can make this this mushroom. So I went and I bought some concrete, put everything out. I'm like, this is going to be like the perfect show and share for me. Okay. So I had it all set up. I'm taking pictures out there of like all the stuff. And I was able to get like, I went to the Dollar Tree and got a lot of the stuff I needed. You know, you need pantyhose and concrete and in like the bucket, and I got a shower curtain to go over the table to keep it protected. And you can do the next slide. And then you cut the hose, the pantyhose, and tie it up in knots. And I used a pot to put it in, and then mix up the concrete and then form it into like little discs and put it over cups. So it's a little plastic cup over on the right. So it kind of forms the top of the mushroom. Okay. And so we did that. And I'm like, I was really excited. I'm like, this has turned out great. So next slide. And so I made them. I made 6 of them out of that mixture that I had. And it was really cool. I'm like, it was fun to do. And I'm like, all right, this is looking like the YouTube videos. I'm like, all right, this is good. So next slide. And these are the stems that I made. So I used a sawhorse and tried to be clean. So I put the plastic underneath, and then that's more of the pantyhose, and you put it in and it kind of hangs. So it gives some structure to the stems. So go ahead and next slide. So when I unwrapped them, and they turned out kind of rocky and kind of funky. And like you could see some of them have the lines in it, whereas the seam of where the pantyhose was. And I'm like, and then they were really, really rocky, and they're just kind of a little off. And I'm like, okay, it's all right. We're going to see. So next slide. And then the bottoms, when I took the hose off it, they kind of fell apart. They were really very rocky and kind of shattered the stems. And I was a little frustrated. I'm like, all right, back to YouTube. I'm like, maybe I should watch more than one video. So, so I went and watched more videos and realized there's a difference between concrete and cement. And there's like this whole thing and all this stuff. And my daughter and I ran to, what was this? We were supposed to get a certain type, and it starts, I think, Foslam or something like that. Concrete, and we ended up getting a bag, and we had to get sand with it, and it was a 94-pound bag. It was the smallest they had at Lowe's. And then there was a 55-pound thing of sand. So the two of us trying to get it in the back of my car, my Jeep. And I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to put this in my house or where I'm going to put it. It was pretty it was pretty inexpensive, which was really nice. Like this stuff was only $5 for a bag, or $3 for a bag. And the other stuff was like, okay, it's like 13 for this big thing. And then the sand was another 5. And I'm like, all right. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go back to YouTube again. And I'm like, I'm actually going to check to see what Home Depot has. And so Home Depot had the stuff that we're supposed to get. That's, I think it's called, actually, if you go to the next slide, it's on there. Oh, no, that's what they looked like when they were done. They just weren't, I wasn't really happy with them because they broke off a lot.
Okay. Was this supposed to be your first slide?
This is my first. Well, this wasn't supposed to be my first slide. This was like still my first attempt. So next slide. So I went back and then found this nice box of 25-pound box of cement ball. And you just add water. It's super thin and easy to work with. This time I actually got gloves because my hands got ripped apart using the cement without gloves. And my nails turned yellow and it was a mess. And so, and also I read about cooking spray. So I put cooking spray on it, things like that. Got it all set up again. I'm like, this is awesome. And so next slide. So we mixed it up. It's a lot thinner to work with. Did the same thing. Those are some of in the back right is the carnage of what I had before. So I'm like, mixed it up. It was nice and thin. So I started doing the same thing, filling them up. Next slide. and made their little mushroom tops. And next slide. And made the little mushroom bottoms. Next slide. And then it was time to take it apart. And the pantyhose stuck to it. We
Oh, no.
can't get the pantyhose off because before it just peeled off when it was the thicker stuff. And this is much thinner. And it just, the pantyhose isn't coming off now. And this was last night. And I'm like, so I think we're going to try to sand them down or either that or try mixing the two together. So next slide. So yeah, this is the carnage. This is the mess. We even tried using some balloons and covering the outside, trying to make something, and those were kind of interesting. And I don't know. And also those gloves sucked. I need to get like rubber gloves that are rubber all the way because I couldn't tie the balloons or tie the pantyhose with those gloves. And I ended up getting my cement all over my hands again, and they're all ripped up again. But so I think we're going to try doing that. And though this is what it's supposed to look like. Oh, go back.
Oh, so this was what it's supposed to look like.
That's what they're supposed to look
Okay.
like. So, I mean, the form is really cute. I mean, this is the top, and like after I do it, I'll fill it with more cement in there, and then put it on, and it'll look adorable. And then out, I mean, be weatherproof and stuff. But
is this one that you made there?
yeah, this is one that I made. Yeah.
I mean, it looks
So,
good.
It'll be okay, but this one, it still has the pantyhose all
Ah.
to it. And so I don't know what we're going to do. So, so it is a fail. It is, well, no, it's not a complete fail. We're just still learning.
It's just not done yet.
Yeah. Oh, use a torch to get the pantyhose off.
Oh, that might work.
Cool. Oh, yeah. And we're cleaning the garage out, and I just found my son's, he has a big torch thingy. Oh,
There you go.
That'll be so much fun. Great idea. See, I came to the right place. You
You
guys
did.
give me all the good ideas. But I like playing with the cement, and it was really kind of neat to do, and there's a lot of fun things to do with it. So I just know to get smaller boxes. It's easier.
It looks like y'all had a lot of fun
Yeah.
experimenting with it.
Yeah. It's a new medium. So, well, thank you.
Thank you.
So that was the last show and share. The last.
That
virtual
was
show
the
and share.
last virtual show and share. Well,
Yay.
for our virtual show and share fully, yeah.
Yes.
And now
All
for
right.
some announcements. Thank you, Laurie.
Thank you.
All right, so we have a class coming up. Paul's going to do a slicer obedience training. That's on the 9th, which is a Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Is that one virtual or in person, Paul? I think it's virtual. Virtual. Yes, virtual. So sign up if you're interested. This one will be a virtual, and it is open to the public, so anybody can sign up.
It is not on the 9th.
It is not on the 9th.
It is on the 16th. Same
Okay,
time.
well,
but on the 16th.
I did 16th, sorry. I did not update the slide from last week, apparently, so. All right,
there was some confusion about that.
Okay, so it's the 16th. Sign up if you want to do it. I went back and we've been keeping track of some statistics for these virtual show and shares. And so it's hard to believe this is the last one, and next week we'll be meeting at the space to do members only show and share in person. But we've been doing virtual show and share for 62 weeks. It's hard to believe that we've done it for 62 straight weeks. Over that course, we've had 341 different shares, and 76 different people have shared over that time. We have 3 people who have shared over 20 times: Tim, Isaac, and Sue. So they all get a ribbon. Next Tuesday, we're going to meet at the space. It is open to members only. We're going to do that for a few weeks before we open it up to the public. And we are also going to grill out. I believe Paul is going to be bringing a smoker, and we're going to have some brats, and we're going to have a couple of grills going. Have some burgers and dogs to go with it. I think there's going to be some desserts and sides as well. It's going to be a good time. We should have a laser smoke. So show up. I'm going to try to be out early doing directly after work to get some grills going. I don't know what time you're showing up, Paul, to do your smokers. I think you said in the morning you're going to do a brisket all day or something. Is that what you said?
I've been kicking around the idea of perhaps throwing on a pork butt and maybe driving down I-40 with the smoker running butts.
That would be hilarious.
We'll see how the weekend goes. There will definitely be bratwurst that will be smoked on the smoker.
So at a minimum, brats and dogs and burgers next week at the space. Members are welcome. You can bring the guests with you, and we'll do that for a few weeks, and then maybe we'll try the public at the space. This email, we're going to keep it around for a little bit. I think we're going to try a hybrid situation next week. Is that right, Billy? We're going to allow people to do some virtual shares if they want to. If you're unable to make it to the space, we're going to give that a shot. So you can send them here. We'll get you set up. Figure it out. It's kind of in flux, but we'll figure it out as we go. We'll have several people sharing their projects in person next. I know of a few people who are going to do it, and we'll probably have a few. The way that we usually do that, I imagine we have a lot of people who have now never visited Show and Share in person, and so if you're unfamiliar, the way that we do that, we don't do the preparation ahead of time for that. You just bring your project with you. You'll sign up when you get there, and then you'll get to go up at the podium and explain to your project. We'll have a sign-up sheet, that's right. And so the preparation of sending slides and all that ahead of time, we kind of had to do for the virtual, but when we're in person, we just have a sign-up sheet. You just show up with your project and you get to talk about it there. You can be as prepared as you want to be, or you can just talk on the fly. Some people do. Just as a reminder, you can, we as Knox Makers are a poor, broke nonprofit, and we could use your money. We survive on member dues and donations. A nice passive way to send us your hay pennies is to select us as an organization for your Amazon Smile. It costs you nothing extra, and we get a payout once in a while. Or you can just send a donation directly. You can see how to do that by going to knoxmakers.org/donate. And with that, that was our last virtual show and share. We're going to close down the recording and open up the cameras for chat.